Thank you for coming. My name is Alison Rouse. I am your regional chair for the East Midlands, and I'll be the chair for this hustings today. And thank you very much for coming. We're here to listen to our two candidates who are seeking your vote in the upcoming leadership ballot. Now, to begin with, I just want to give you a bit of an outline of how this is going to work. Each candidate is asked to give an opening statement lasting no more than 6 minutes. Now, representatives of the candidates were in HQ the other day and pulled lots as to who was going to go first. And for our hustings, Joe is going to do 6 minutes first. And then after that, it also means that rotates the questions, sort of question time styly. And then at the end, Ed would go first for the closing statement to make that a little bit more fair. So, you were emailed speakers' cards, so we've collected those. And we will be talking to the different members of the audience who submitted their questions to allow you to get your responses. Now, as you can see, there is, for the Green Liberal Democrats anyway, a vast amount of paper on this desk. There's quite a lot of questions. And I, for one, would very much like to get as many of you having your questions answered as possible. So what we're probably going to do is there's going to be very little time for supplementary questions. However, the candidates will be around for a while afterwards if you want to chase those up and get some more information. So I think that's how we're probably going to manage most of this today. Now, can I ask basically candidates, if you stay concise with your answers, please, and stay on topic. And also, if you are going to be walking about, because I appreciate you may want to walk and talk, can I ask that you stay within roughly the stairs, because that's the capture area of the camera. Audience, as I said, candidates will be staying around for a little networking after this session so that you can speak to them directly. Please remember that these questions should be directed equally to both candidates who are sitting here together as a panel. As a chair, I cannot accept questions that are not directed at the candidates, and also will not accept statements. They must be questions. Now, after we have done this, we will then be giving a 2-minute closing statement from each candidate, and we're going to close these proceedings in the 90 minutes in accordance with our venue booking. Anyone who wants to tweet, because I know you're all on your phones and everything else, you can use the hashtags, hashtag LibDemLeadership, or hashtag LibDemSurge. And also, as we are at the Green Liberal Democrats conference today, I would encourage all of you who are getting taxis back to the train station after this to taxi share, obviously. There you go, Keith. I said it, all right? You good? Awesome. Right. Okay then, ladies and gentlemen. We'll make a start. Joe, can I ask you for your opening 6-minute statement, please?
And I put my mic on, and I think that's when it starts doing the... Oh, yeah, good. Right, okay. I'm delighted to be here. Fellow Liberal Democrats, I'm running to be leader of our party because I believe the country is crying out for a liberal movement to take on the forces of nationalism and populism, the likes of Johnson and Farage, and the Liberal Democrats must be at the heart of that movement. Now, I'll talk to you not just about the good times in politics, which we have had lots of recently. We have had our best ever European election results. We have had our best ever number of gains in local elections. And we've even seen polls putting us top. So we're having good times. 20,000 new members in the last 6 weeks. Who here has joined in the last few weeks? You are very, very welcome. But it's not always good times. And I want to tell you about my worst day in politics, which wasn't the day that I lost my seat in 2015, though that was a bad day. It was a year later, in 2016, the morning after the referendum. And I'd gone to bed in disgust, without the result being quite clear, and I woke up and turned the television on to have it confirmed that Leave had won. And Nigel Farage, his face was beaming out of the television screen. I slightly regretted that the television screen was the size that it was. And I'll never forget what he said. He said, and we won it without a shot being fired. And I wanted to be sick. Because a week earlier, a young woman, Jo Cox, had been shot and stabbed outside her constituency surgery for standing up for what she believed in and doing her job. And that Farage would make such a comment like that beggared belief. Except this was the man who a week before had stood in front of a breaking point poster that was specifically designed to foster hate and division within our country. And that nationalism must be stopped, and it must be stopped with liberalism. When I the election in 2017, I knew in a heartbeat that I had to stand again and win my seat back. I've never been one to sit on the sidelines. From when I was a child and I went into the body shop and I started off my campaigning by signing petitions on environmental matters inspired by Anita Roddick, to taking on campaigns at university for internet points in bedrooms in my hall of residence, to my crusades as a new MP, bringing forward a ban on excessive packaging 12 years ago, long before it was a fashionable issue, and then as a minister standing up for the most vulnerable in our society, clamping down on unscrupulous payday lenders and taking to task rogue employers who do not properly pay the national minimum wage. But I want to make a bit of a confession today. There was a time when I campaigned against the Liberal Democrats. It was almost exactly 30 years ago. I was 9 years old. I was in my kitchen and I was chatting with my dad. And the European elections were coming up, and I was trying to get him to vote Green. And he was saying, I'm going to vote Liberal Democrat. And it went back and forth. And my argument to him was that there was nothing more important than looking after our environment. And that if we didn't get that right, there wouldn't be a planet, there wouldn't be a society. And so all of our policies didn't really matter. And my dad said to me that that was incredibly important, but the Liberal Democrats had good policies on the environment, and they had the policies that we needed for the other areas of our society too. Looking back, I kind of think we were both right. He was right about which way to vote, but I was right that if we do not address the environmental crisis, nothing else will matter. And of course, back then, the issues at stake were CFCs, and we were talking about global warming, and the terminology has changed to climate change, and now, happily, climate emergency, because that is what it is. And now I have the experience that I went along to the Extinction Rebellion protest with my 5-year-old, and have those discussions to work out how we can create a better world that his generation are going to be able to inherit, and me and my generation, I'm not going to feel like we've messed it up for them. So, whether it's fighting nationalism, whether it's dealing with Brexit and stopping Brexit, or whether it is how we fight climate change and climate emergency, now is not enough. We need to provide a positive yes. We need to paint that future of a society where we have an economy that works in the long term for people and planet. We need to paint a society where everybody as an individual can have dignity and be respected for who they are with equality. We have a huge opportunity in our politics right now for transformation. There is an appetite for it. We can transform our politics, our economy, and our society. And Britain needs a liberal movement to do it. So let's do it. Let's do it now. Let's do it together.
Friends, this is the first Nottingham leadership hustings in over 100 years, when we've just beaten both the Labour and Conservative parties in a UK-wide election. We are... So we've had some tough times, the 2015, 2017 general election and the appalling 2016 referendum. But thanks to people like you, we fought our way back, although I know you loved delivering all those leaflets. As leader, my priority, now we are back in the game, is to win it. And I believe my campaigning history shows I know how to win even when people don't expect it. I first won my seat back in 1997 when I wasn't a target seat. We weren't supposed to win. But we did, by building a great team of local council campaigners with a simple message: Ed for education. We've got another successful simple message at the moment: stop Brexit. It's really good in Anglo-Saxon. But my major concern as we prepare for campaigns to win is that I'm not sure enough people know what Liberal Democrats stand for at the moment. Brexit aside, I just think they're lost. And as leader, one of my top priorities will be to make sure people do know what we stand for. Our late great friend Paddy Ashdown said he'd sell his grandmother for a brand image for the party. His grandmother had already died, so he just worked on it. And under Paddy, we became the party of education. I believe my political story will help us become the party of the environment. Because I was an environmentalist before I joined the Liberal Democrats. Age 18, I read a book called Seeing Green by Jonathan Porritt. And Seeing Green really alarmed me, how human beings were poisoning our own home. And the only politician who spoke to me about how we could save our planet was Paddy. And I joined the party back in 1989. So just imagine how this environmentalist felt when I became Secretary of State for Energy and Climate Change in 2012. For 3 years, I ran for renewables. We nearly quadrupled Britain's green power. We made this country the world leader in offshore wind. And in Europe, I campaigned across the EU to secure successfully ambitious greenhouse gas reduction targets. And through the EU, went to the UN to campaign for global treaties, and we ended up with the Paris Climate Treaty. So I know climate politics, when the climate issue is the most pressing issue facing our world. From rising sea levels to floods, to crop destruction, to disease, we have to act. I'm clear on the key climate fight ahead. It's on the economy. We have to green our economy, and I'm talking about how we decarbonise capitalism, how we change the rules so we can shift trillions of dollars and euros away from fossil fuel investment into green technology for the future. We need to do that because it's right, but also it will win us a new generation of voters. Remember those wonderful young people striking for the climate? Remember the Extinction Rebellion protests? I want those people to protest and march with us. We can win on the environment. But I'm not just a proud tree hugger. I'm a liberal heart, head and soul. From equality and diversity to internationalism, from human rights to local democracy, liberal values have never been needed so much. And yet they're under threat. Threat from the far left and the far right, from xenophobia to transphobia, from anti-Semitism to Islamophobia. These are terrifying times. Times for liberals to stand up and be countered against the peddlers of fear and division like Tommy Robinson and Boris Johnson. Yeah. My record shows I won't flinch from those fights. When I moved the amendment to abolish the horrific, vile, Tory, homophobic Section 28. When I fought for 5 years to get my constituent out of Guantanamo Bay. Let me tell you, there were no votes in standing up for an alleged Islamic terrorist. But I could not have been more proud when I secured Bishop's release from Guantanamo. For me, liberalism is standing up for the victims of injustice. So that's my pitch. Climate change, liberalism, campaigning to win. But my politics is quite personal. I come from Nottingham. I lost both my parents as a child here. I was a young carer for 3 years for my mother. Years later, Emily and I have 2 wonderful children, and my wonderful son, John, has very, very special needs which need a lot of caring. So I've faced personal challenges, but I think they've made me stronger and more determined, but they've also taught me about the importance of caring, how vital our NHS is. So I want to lead a party that's pro-European, that fights climate change, and that is compassionate.
But that's I'm afraid, Ed.
So please vote for me.
Right then, ladies and gentlemen, we will be doing the questions with one candidate answering. Sorry about that. One candidate answering.
And you need injury time when they clap, that's the problem.
You get no more. And no biscuits. She gets no. Right, what we're going to do the first question and we will alternate which candidate asks first. I would ask you to keep your answers concise, please, so we can get as many questions in as possible. So, first of all, there are 2 questions that I'm going to combine together here because they're roughly on the same topic. So, we've got Mary Page and Simon Oliver. So, basically the questions are, what is needed to stop city air pollution and convert to more sustainable transport solutions? And how can we ensure that the poor are not disproportionately affected and disadvantaged by this? And also, climate change is above all a generational justice issue. Do the candidates feel that universal basic income addresses some of the debt that previous generations owe the future and will not be financially disadvantaged? So if I can go to you first, Jo. Sure.
So, on how do we change the way that we travel? I mean, we're going to have to transform the way our entire lives operate to achieve a zero-carbon future. And clearly one of the important elements of which we need to create a transformation is in transport. Obviously, that's about electric cars, other forms of public transport, trams, electric trains, electrification of railways. And we also need to recognise, and I know the question was about cities, that when you look at rural areas, then there needs to be solutions that work in rural areas too, because there's far too many parts of our country, where actually a car is the only feasible way to get around. So the way in which we move to cars which do not pollute is absolutely crucial. One of the things which we did in coalition, which frustrated me hugely, was the constant refusing to put up fuel duty, freezing fuel duty, which firstly cost a huge amount of money. I think it was about £40 billion over the lifetime of the coalition. And secondly, just exacerbated this problem between public transport and private transport in terms of what makes economic sense for people. So it's all very well to say take the train, but if it's going to be twice as expensive as it would be to drive, then that's not going to work. And so it really is, that whole economics of making it attractive to have public transport. I mean, London is a good example, right? London public transport works incredibly well. Actually, they're able to make changes to make it a lot greener, to change the bus fleets and so on and so forth. And that's actually because there is a huge amount of control of that, planning it, and subsidy as well. And that's what you need to make a transport infrastructure work. And in terms of the poor, then if you have that, it is about making sure that it is set at a cost price that people can get around in a way that they can also have, through bus passes and so on, for older people, you can actually have mechanisms that mean that people can use that transport network. And in terms of the generational justice issue, I mean, this is absolutely, as I spoke about in my opening remarks, it was a conversation I had with my dad, and it's then what I think about what we're leaving for the next generation. UBI is a really interesting idea. Now, our party policy groups have looked at it, until now have decided that it is regressive in the way in which it gets implemented, which is not something as Liberal Democrats that we would want. But I am open to how Radical ideas like UBI or other things could be part of the solution, because I'm absolutely certain that our economy just carrying on as it does now does not work. Does not work for too many people who work hard and still can't afford to make ends meet. Now, there's a pilot of UBI in Glasgow, and I think we should look at that carefully to see whether there are lessons that can be learned, or whether there's other models like UBS, Universal Basic Services, other ways in which we might have a different approach to economic policy that will also help to address that generational inequality, which is a very real issue. And in terms of the different divides in our country, a lot is heard about the geographical divides and the income divides, and those are important, but that age divide is an increasingly important one too. Thank you very much.
Air pollution is a serious health issue, not just an environmental issue. And we need to campaign against air pollution on both those reasons. It's affecting people's breathing. It's affecting people's hearts. It's affecting people's brains. There's links to dementia from air pollution. So it's a critical issue, and we should champion it. It's partly transport, EVs, electric vehicles, public transport, walking, cycling, all that. Of course we have to do that. But it's not just transport. It's heating systems. Now, Michael Gove was ridiculed for talking about wood-burning stoves. I have to tell you, he was right. And there are other heating systems using gas that are a problem, creating local air pollution. And by the way, now you may laugh at this, but if you have cows near your town and the wind blows the wrong way, I'm serious, that can create air pollution. So it's a complicated issue. We need to think about it far more deeply than we have up till now, but we need to tackle it. And by the way, we need to stay in Europe to tackle it, because Europe has the proper measures on air pollution. Transport for the less well-off. Well, clearly, if you can improve things like walking and cycling, that helps, but actually buses are fundamental to fair, affordable transport systems. I'd like to see, obviously, train fares reduced, but on buses, I think this is where we can make the biggest impact most quickly. And the rest of the country outside London suffers from Tory ideology with respect to buses. They are not regulated. It is a free-for-all, and it results in poor bus services and higher fares, and we need to regulate the bus service again. Finally, on UBR, back in 1989, I worked with a wonderful lady, Nancy Sear, to develop a policy called Citizens' Income. It was a UBI, and it was our party policy for a few years. Now, things have moved on, and I think we do need to look at pilots before we go back to it, because there are some challenges with it, as I can take you through afterwards in the bar. But I think we need to tackle poverty, and this intergenerational justice issue is critical. But the first thing that I think we could do, and we could start it now, is start rebuilding council houses. Because housing is the biggest... The price of housing is one of the biggest contributors to social injustice and inequality in our country. And unless we tackle that, and I believe building council houses is frankly the only way we can do it, we will leave intergenerational injustice.
Right, our next question, forgive me, G.W. Lysett? Have I pronounced that correctly? Are you in the hall? Ah, where's... Jane, could you grab the microphone and... As you're in the middle, shall I read it? Are you okay with that? Okay. The question is to the candidates. Do you support all women's selection lists? And do you consider the practice to be either liberal or democratic?
I changed my mind on this, and you are allowed to change your mind. I've been to several conferences where this has been debated, and my wife was dead against all women shortlists, and she stood for Parliament 4 times. However, We made such little progress in diversity in our party. It was a scandal. And we've made a lot of progress, and I would want to make sure we got to 50-50 women, men in our parliamentary party as a top priority. And I don't think we could even begin to have got there without all-women shortlists. That is the truth. And it's too important, and while I am instinctively, as a Liberal, concerned about all-women shortlists, I think the evidence is that we had to have them to promote our other value of equality. And I'll tell you the other part of equality and diversity I'm still worried about, which we're not tackling, and that is our black and ethnic minority communities. If you look at the target seats for the party, we only have Cameron Hussein in Leeds North West, who has a really good chance of winning next time. He's a brilliant candidate, but he can't do it by himself. So we need to think even more about that, ladies and gentlemen.
In 2001, I stood up at party conference and argued against my political hero, Shirley Williams. I was petrified of doing that, as you can imagine, at the age of 21. And I basically said, Shirley, you were wrong. We do not need all-women shortlists. And the amendment that I was arguing for was carried, and instead we set up the Gender Balance Task Force, which is now the Campaign for Gender Balance. And since 2001, I have worked with so many people across the country to try to get equality of representation without all-women shortlists. And in 2016, I changed my mind and argued for all-women shortlists because of my experience of trying to do it without. And I'm going to just tell some home truths to the membership here, because we have printed on our membership cards that we are the party where no one shall be enslaved by poverty, ignorance or conformity, and that we have that value of equality at our hearts. But first of all, just look around here today, right? We're here in the East Midlands, and are we actually representative of the place that we are? And I don't think we are. Liberal Democrats, I don't think we are. And it's the same when we go to conferences and we see who is speaking from the conference podium. When I asked colleagues to help with the issue of getting more women candidates, there was something I did very specifically with my fellow MPs. I said, look, we've got this programme to support women candidates. All we need to know is who are the women who would be brilliant MPs, and we can train them up. And where we really need that is in our held seats, so that when MPs stand down, we've got a pool of great candidates. I asked my fellow Lib Dem MPs to give me the names of 3 women in their local area. I also, by the way, told them how many approved women candidates we had on the list in their constituencies, and in most cases it was none. And I helpfully sent around a form in a boring meeting, right? So it was like a time when they had the opportunity to just do something. I said, right, fill in a boring agenda item the 3 names and hand it back to me, or email it to me, or stick it in my pigeonhole. Fewer than a third of my colleagues in that parliamentary party even filled in that form. Right? That is where leadership within our party was, and I mean leadership in the widest sense, in our group of MPs, but also in places right across our country. So the way I see it is this is important. But if we do not have the mechanism of an all-women shortlist or similar mechanisms for other groups, although it is important, it is never urgent. And we are all busy. We're mostly volunteers, having to do loads of things, organise the next leaflet and the print deadlines and work out how to raise money and organise the AGM. And making sure we talent spot candidates from underrepresented groups is on our list, but it's down there. And what all-women shortlists do is put it up at the top. And that is why we do need that if we want to make a reality of our values of equality.
Has Jason gone? There we are. Your question next, Jason. Do you want to take that, Jen? Oh, sorry.
Some more water, please.
And this is to you first, Jen.
Can you hear me, Mother?
Yeah.
Hi, Joe and Ed. Jason Billing, Rushcliffe, Liberal Democrat, PPC. Rushcliffe, as you know, voted for Remain in 2016. We are the most pro-EU constituency in this region. We also held off the Brexit non-party and came first on May the 23rd. So that's our bit. My question to both of our leadership candidates: what are you willing and able to do over the time we have between now and the next general election to come and help Rushcliffe and the rest of the East Midlands and get MPs, as well as MPs from the Liberal Democrats in the East Midlands? Thank you.
Joe, if you'd like to go first, please.
Well, we are on the crest of a wave, I like to think, at the moment, and well done to everybody who was behind that result in Rushcliffe, and indeed all of the fantastic results that we have had right across our country. As leader, I think one of the most important things that I can do to help is actually to make sure that we have the good presence in the air war, that when people turn on their televisions and turn on their radios, they hear Liberal Democrats, and that would be myself as leader, but also our fantastic, talented team of parliamentarians, which now, of course, includes 16 new members of the European Parliament, or 15 new members of the European Parliament, and the fantastic Catherine Bearder, re-elected. So that is, I think, one of the key things that we need to do. We need to be able to generate more people joining our party. It is fantastic that we have 105,000 members and that is the most that we ever have had, but there are 60 million people in our country. Millions of them have liberal values. So we should be aiming for so many more people to come and join our movement. And so that is the second thing that I would do to help. And then I recognise that it is so important that as a party, we come together, that we have that time, face-to-face, out campaigning, motivating, and some of that we should be doing as well digitally. We've got a lot more that we can do to involve our members digitally, but some of that is about events like this, it's about dinners, it's about getting out there, knocking on doors. And people who know the work that I've done in the party for the last 22 years, I am a campaigning junkie. I love elections, by-elections, and so on, and I hope to be seeing very many of you in the, I was going to say streets, but probably farm lanes is more appropriate, of Brecon and Radnorshire in the coming weeks. So that campaigning, getting out there and motivating people alongside the media and getting new members to our cause is how I will help win more seats in the East Midlands.
This is my home region. My father was from a mining family in North Nottinghamshire, and I was born in Annesley Woodhouse. My grandparents had a shop in Mansell Woodhouse, and I lived in Sutton Ashfield for a while. And my dad died when I was 4, but I was flicking through a photo album about 15 years ago with my late gran, and there was a press cutting from 1958. I thought my dad was a Tory, but in this little press cutting, he was addressing the Sutton Ashfield Liberals, and his message was, only the Liberals understand the NHS. So I think it must be in the blood. And so my ties to this area are very, very strong. I lived in Mapley Park for many years, from 6 to 18. I'm a Notts County fan. It's been a tough year. It's been a tough year. And, you know, I agree with Ken Clark on a lot of things, but he's a Forest fan, you know, so get serious. So what I'm really trying to say is, I like coming home. And I'm very, very happy to come here, and maybe you can show me some of the local hostelries when I do. So very happy to support, and that's the job of the leader, to get around the country and to go to regions, not just the East Midlands, but other places too. And Joe's right about the air war. One's got to get on the media huge amounts. Over 20 years I've got on the media countless times. And just before coming up here, I got on the local independent radio show, the one linked to Capital. I've done an interview with Nottingham Post. So, it's very important when you go to regions that you talk to the regional media. The regional media is absolutely critical to getting a message over. And there's one reason. People don't trust the national media anymore. Can you blame them? But they do trust the regional media. And I've always made a real priority to go and talk to the regional media, because I know that helps local campaigners and local parties most. And also you can get to more of the key people who are opinion formers in that area. So I want to come and campaign with you, but I want to make sure that we are getting in the local and regional media with you far, far more.
Next question is from Lorraine Chadwick. Chadwin? Apologies. Chadwin. My apologies here, sorry. And to Ed first, how can we bring the public on board to wanting to adapt their consumer choices to be part of the, forgive me, what was that word done? Part of the, my apologies. To be part of the solution to the climate crisis. So that was, how can we bring the public on board to wanting to adapt their consumer choices to be part of the solution to the climate crisis? Ed, if you can go first, please.
Because we can make it in their interest. One of the amazing things that we achieved in the coalition was to dramatically reduce the cost of green energy. When I became Secretary of State, people say, it's so expensive. We don't want that, it's too expensive. Well, now, because of the competitive auctions I put in place for solar, for onshore wind to offshore wind, green power is now the cheapest. So what's not to like? But we can go further. I have a vision that we should be talking about your home, your power station. And that's talking to people in their own homes. If we can insulate people's homes properly to cut their energy bills, if we can help them with some of the new technology, be it heat pumps, be it solar panels, be it batteries, you actually can make homes which are independent of the grid. They can produce their own energy. They don't need so much energy. And if you don't believe me, go to the building research establishment at Watford, as I've done, to see what is now possible. And isn't that attractive to consumers? No energy bills. We can sell the green agenda big time. And then we come to cars. Now, there's nothing so consumerist as a motor car. But we can push electric vehicles and low-emission vehicles far faster than the current government. We should be far more ambitious for the cut-off period where we see the end of new cars with internal combustion engine. I believe we can do that. Other countries are doing that. And if we can lead that, people's homes can be better, people's cars can be better, and we can bring the consumers with us. Now, some people might want me to answer to this question. Well, you should all consume less. You can go and live in a cave, all that sort of stuff. If we do that, friends, it won't work. We can't take a hair-shirted approach to winning people over. But the good news is we don't have to. We can sell a vision where people can have good lifestyles, but they can do them in a way that doesn't harm the planet. Now, I think that's politically popular.
So I was telling you earlier about when I went along to the Extinction Rebellion protest with my 5-year-old Andrew. And I had a bit of trepidation, actually, before getting there. I brought Andrew with me, but I left Gabriel, my 11-month-old, with my husband. And the trepidation I had was because I'm very aware, actually, that as the mother of a young baby, that's one of the things that happens. It's quite bad for what you do for the environment. Hands up. I use baby wipes, right? I change a lot of nappies. And I'm yet to be convinced that I'm going to practically take cotton wool balls and, water, which are probably in a plastic bottle anyway, and when I'm out and about to change my baby's nappy. And also, I don't think we're going to sell that to lots of people. But it ought to be possible for somebody to invent plastic-free baby wipes. That's what the solution to that is. But what I found at Extinction Rebellion was a really welcoming atmosphere. They entirely get that what we need to do is make it easy for people to make changes. rather than berate people for not all being vegan or whatever. And in fact, I have to say, it was literally the most polite protest I have ever been to. And yeah, I've been to quite a lot of protests. So I think there's three things we should do. We need to inspire people, we need to nudge them, and then we do need to design in good choices. So in terms of inspire, why are we seeing such progress on the issue of plastic packaging? Well, I think there is one man who deserves huge credit for that, and we all love him. And I was so fangirling when he came to Parliament a few months ago, and I got to hear him speak. And that man is, of course, David Attenborough. You know, what he did by just showcasing the plastic in our oceans inspired people to desire change and to advocate for change. We absolutely need to nudge people then in the right direction. And I think the plastic bag tax is a really good example of this. Lots of people wanted already to take their own bags, but just forgot. But by having that plastic bag tax, it means that you are getting nudged, you're getting asked, oh, are you going to be needing a plastic bag with that? And so it encourages people to change their behaviour and remember to take their reusable bags with them. And then the final thing is to design in good choices. Marks and Spencer's, some years ago, set out a really good process for how they were going to make their company sustainable, and it was called Plan A. And they said there's no Plan B, and it's Plan A. And we're going to tell our consumers about some of the things we're doing, but basically we're going to take the view that they expect us as an ethical company to make the right decisions. And so it's not about having one brand of tuna that's dolphin friendly, it's just about going, do you know what? It should all be not about killing dolphins. We're not just going to have one thing that is going to be treating people fairly. We're just going to do that with all of our products. And government needs to do this too. And that is where things like phasing out of petrol cars, how that's going to be done, it's about making the choices for people designed in and easy. It needs to be not as if the environmental choice is going to cost you more and always be so much more hassle. We need to make it easy for people.
Okay, the next question is from Adam Link. So, Joes, for you first. Do you want to?
I should know that this works, right? So, I can't remember, the question and I worded it is quite verbose, but basically it's about using fracking as a bridging technology and whether the candidates support that. I appreciate that a lot of supporters, particularly in this room as a Green Liberal Democrat room, are not in favour of fracking. I have heard counter-arguments, and I've not taken a position on this either way. I want the question debated. To say, I've heard arguments that say it should be used as a bridging technology to get us from fossil fuels to fully renewable. And I would like to hear both candidates say if they support that, and if so, why, or why not.
You first, Dan.
So I don't support that. In fact, I just don't support fracking, full stop. And I know that there's lots of different arguments that people have about the water supply and earthquakes and so on. And to be honest, I think those things cause concern, although you can probably design in safety mechanisms around them. For me, the fundamental objection that I have is a strategic one about where our energy use is going. We are already planning to take more fossil fuels out of the ground than we can safely use. So it seems to me that starting a whole new industry with the investment that will require and then baking in that those fossil fuels have to come out of the ground in order to make that investment pay off is the wrong direction. And as a result, I think it will crowd out investment that we need in renewables, and that as government we should be setting the really clear direction of travel that says renewables is where we are going. We recognise that there will in the short to medium term still be need for gas and so on, which we already have being produced, and some of that will need to continue. But we should not be starting whole new fossil fuel industries when we know that our future is renewable.
I believe there should be a ban on fracking, but I didn't always think that. Let me take you through the journey. I was in the hot seat as Secretary of State for Energy and Climate Change, inheriting a policy that was pro-fracking and with a party that wanted to frack anywhere. I used to call them the frack baby frackers and say they want to frack every croquet lawn. And the Tories were desperate to do it. But as someone who's trying to get renewable generation going massively, which we succeeded, one had to pretend to the Tories that you were giving them what they wanted. So on fracking, what did I do? Worried about the environmental consequences, I regulated really hard. I brought in a regulation, lots of regulations actually, but one particular regulation over seismicity, trying to deal with the danger of earth tremors. Real serious issue. And I did it on the basis of evidence from the Royal Society and the Royal Academy of Engineering and Scientists. And that regulation that I brought in has stopped the fracking industry because they've not been able to meet the tough environmental regulation that I put in. So you have to therefore question the whole basis of the fracking industry. Now, when I left government and we had a debate in our own conference, I was still not sure then whether we should ban for one reason, and that was whether we'd have enough gas as we went through the transition, your point, without having to import it from places like Russia. And so I was reluctant to support a ban at our party conference. But two things have happened since that motion that have changed my mind. The first is our policies on renewable energy have been even more successful. So there was an auction, the policy I introduced, in September 2017, and that saw the price of offshore wind plummet to under £60 per unit of energy, per megawatt hour. Bear in mind that a few years ago, when I signed a contract for the first major offshore wind, I signed a contract at £140 per megawatt hour, but the auctions I brought in had managed to reduce that price dramatically. And that's relevant because it means we're not going to need so much gas in the future to power gas-powered electricity generators. And so if the demand for gas is falling, you don't need to frack. And there's one final thing that I hadn't read as Secretary of State, which I think is really relevant. And it comes from my favourite environmental NGO. I love Greenpeace, but go and look at Carbon Tracker Initiative. Carbon Tracker Initiative is a little NGO that's done some serious work about the financial viability of the fossil fuel industry. And it basically says that it's not very viable in the future because we've already discovered 4 to 5 times the amount of coal, gas and oil that we could possibly use and stay within the 1.5 degrees of the Paris Climate Treaty. And given that case and given that analysis, it's clear that we should not frack. There's no need to frack. We won't need the gas, and it will be a seriously bad investment. We shouldn't do it.
Right, I'm going to take there's 3 questions here, so I'm going to combine them into one because they're very similar. Make notes, people. Right, okay. Now, given obviously the divisiveness of people such as Farage and Bannon, the horrors of Brexit that we face, whilst at the same time the undermining of trust in politicians, possibly not explaining trade-offs, MPs from other parties joining us, and do they stand in their own constituency? Also things like the issues that we went through with Tim when he was interviewed on Channel 4, and the issues and the impact that had on the LGBT community. What would you, getting to the question, single-handedly, on the biblical proportions of that question, what would you do to try to re-establish trust in politicians so that we have winning campaign themes and you are communicating effectively with your membership so that you take them with you?
Right.
After you've got 2 minutes. No, I'm joking.
If you're going to get trust back, and we lost a lot of trust, let's remember, particularly over tuition fees, you've got to win it back over time by making credible policies that you know you can deliver and that people believe you can deliver. So I would contrast what we do as a party that's evidence-based, with our great democratic way of forming policy, with a Jeremy Corbyn completely crazed view, which I don't think is the way to rebuild trust, and the Tory Brexit view, which clearly isn't based on facts or evidence. So if we're going to rebuild trust, as we must as a party, we need to make sure that we stick to our principles, stick to the way we've done things, and I think that is already paying off. And if you look back at our history, when we've taken principled positions, we've often not been popular, but because we've kept to them, we've won people's trust. I particularly think of the Iraq War. When we came out in opposition, people hated us. Charles Kennedy was put on the front page of the Daily Mail and the Sun with his head on the body of a snake. They attacked us day in, day out. But we were right. We stuck to our guns and we won people over and we gained that trust, and therefore people came to us. And the same thing is happening over Brexit. So I think that's the major lesson I would talk about trust. Stick to our values, be consistent, even when the going gets tough and it doesn't look like it's so popular. And how do you communicate these issues? Well, of course you've got to get the media, that's obvious. But you've got to do it in simple, clear ways. And as I said in my opening remarks, this is something I feel particularly passionate about. And I think the party, before Stop Brexit, hadn't been doing that. So I take my political heritage back to Paddy Ashdown when we came up with the policy of a penny on income tax for education. Something that could be delivered, and that was part of our principles and was distinctive, and it was so effective. It was our top policy in the 92 election, the 97 election, and the 2001 election. And I'm proud to be part of devising that. In 2003-04 under Charles, when I was the local government spokesman, I came up with a campaign, Scrap Council Tax, about getting a fairer tax system, about devolving power to local authorities. That worked. I don't know if any of you were part of that campaign. I met my wife as part of it, so I'm quite attached to it. Axe the tax and all those petitions. It was very effective. And I believe whatever policies that we get from our conferences, we do need to make sure that we communicate them in the most simplest way possible, and we repeat them and we repeat them till we are bored sick of them. And when we're bored sick of them, maybe the electorate's begun to hear them. So rebuild that trust by sticking to our principles and communicate effectively in simple, clear, repeated ways.
I think the answer to how to rebuild trust and how to communicate is actually the same thing. And I don't actually think it's about what slogan we use. I think it's about speaking from the heart and being authentic. If there is one lesson that we can learn from Farage and Bannon and even Johnson, because they are effective, worryingly, it is about connecting with people on an emotional level. Lots of us make our decisions about how to vote using rational information, but we actually, as human beings, not quite as rational as we sometimes like to think we are. There's a lot of post hoc rationalisation because we make an immediate decision about something in our gut, how we feel about it, and then we find the evidence to back it up. And we all do this. And so that's why we need to speak on an emotional level. Now, I would argue our job is actually harder than that of Farage. And the reason for that is about how you create an emotional connection quickly. I read an absolutely fascinating book last summer. I would recommend it. It is called 10 Arguments for Deleting Your Social Media Accounts Right Now. Now, I confess, I didn't manage to do it. But I did take a 3-month pause while I was on maternity leave, which was lovely. The book goes through various arguments, but it basically says social media is being toxic to our politics and the way in which we interact with one another. Now, we don't, as politicians, really have the luxury of being able to say we'll just not be on social media. But the argument is that the currency of social media is likes and engagement and sharing. And people are quicker to hate and to anger than they are to more positive emotions like love. And that's why social media ends up encouraging clickbait headlines that are shocking, that make people angry and furious, and that are often fake news. And it is changing the whole course of our political debate. So we need to find a way to make that positive case, to make people understand that emotional connection for our positive liberal values. And that is how we rebuild trust. Because on the Brexit issue, this has been crucial. You know, people feel very strongly about it, but to be able to stand there, and I've been in all the Lib Dem People's Vote meetings, been on the stage at the rally in Parliament Square, we are successful on our Stop Brexit campaign because we really feel it. We really care about it, and so do so many other people too. That is the lesson that we should take from it. And the final bit of the question that somebody asked about MPs joining our party, that's why it's so important that they share our values. And there are many people out there who are currently in different parties and do share our values, and we should welcome them into our party. And I have to say, I am proud at the response of Liberal Democrat members up and down the country when Chuka Amuna joined us on Thursday night. Because be in no doubt, others are watching how he is welcomed and treated. There are other MPs who we agree with on some things, but we do not share their values, and they should not join us. But we should work together where we agree. And the final thing is that local organisations should always have the final say on who is their candidate at a general election or local election.
Apologies for a little bit of feedback that's been received in the room. Right, okay.
Excuse me, I could sort that out in 15 seconds. I'm sounding.
Go on, then.
Is everyone here okay?
Just turn my head to see if I'm using it in between, but then I put it on the screen.
I think it's
Yeah? I put it off when I
Is there a doctor in the house?
Can I just say, I have been remarkably quiet tonight because I'm in the chair's aid. But one of the interesting things I've noticed is that people are getting very hot.
Yes.
And this is to do with the human heat, and we need to take advantage of human heat better than we are doing tonight. In heating houses, passive house, finished.
You all right? You good? Turn it on and see if it's... Next one is from Steve Card. Card. No? It's this one. It's that one. Thank you. Is that Steve Card? All right, you're over there. Are you all right? I'll read it.
No, it's fine. You read it.
What will you do to better equip smaller local parties to compete more successfully in their campaigning, especially in activating members and supporters and the use of technologies where finances are very constrained? Jo, you first, please.
Hello. Oh, no feedback. Wow. this is actually quite an exciting time to be in politics, even in a smaller local party, because we have so many more tools now to be able to reach out in an effective way. We, of course, have fewer smaller local parties than we used to have, thanks to the Lib Dem surge, which is great. But it is incredibly important that wherever people are in the country, we are making the best use of members. And I don't think we always do this as well as we could. So I think we need to use digital tools to make it easier for people to engage, whether that's within the policy process, whether that's within their local party, or even if that's with local parties that are different to where they live. Many people live in one area and work in another area, or they travel to go and help somewhere where they've got a connection to. And at the moment, that is ad hoc and difficult to organise. We ought to be able to use digital tools better to do that. We also should be able to have a much more networked model. In so many organisations, we are moving away from a kind of centre that decides everything and tells our bits what to do. And to be honest, that's never been great from a Lib Dem philosophy perspective, but that is how our kind of HQ system has worked. We need to be moving much more to a networked model where different local parties can innovate and try different methods of campaigning, and then they can share their experience. And again, we can use digital tools through online seminars, through videos about what's happening, to be able to share that expertise. And the final thing I would say, and we've certainly done this in East Bartonshire, a little bit of money goes such a long way if you're advertising online. Obviously, Facebook is, you sometimes have, different thoughts about putting money into Facebook, given some of the stuff that they do. But, literally £5 or £10 on Facebook can get a targeted local campaign about a bus route, about a town centre development, to so many of the people who need to see that and who will come on board to us as a local party. And I think the key thing is about making sure that we sort of get out those skills to people as to how to do that. And I think we can disseminate that through much more online seminars to help people understand how to make the most of these tools with small resources.
I think this is an essential question and a challenge for the party. Because all my time in the party, we have focused on target seats, quite rightly, to make sure we do get councillors back and MPs back. But I think these are very different political times. And I'm not saying we don't target, but I do say that we should be ready for when the tide really comes our way, which it may be happening now. When I was going around the local authorities, the local elections, it seemed to me that the tide was coming our way this May. And I'd say to local activists, is there another ward that the council candidates actually want to win? Not always want to win. And that we've got the capacity and the money to put out just another leaflet, because we might just then take that ward. And by the way, that happened a lot. So the corollary of this, of helping smaller local parties, we absolutely have to put that into our business plan now, because we may be about to face an election where smaller local parties are winning MPs. And they need to be ready to take the opportunity if it comes. So there are three things we need to do. One's training, one's technology, and one's money. Training, we can do really basic training, online training modules, of course, training at regional conferences, training at national conferences. But also, and this is an idea I had some time ago, but we've never had the money to do it. I had this idea of an itinerant trainer who actually sort of has a camper van and goes around the country training all the local parties who aren't getting the other training. We've really got to reach out to people. And we've got to teach people basic skills. Now, one of the most basic skills I teach is when you're reaching your members and your deliverers, don't just use email. Don't just use email. Phone people. It takes more time, but it's far more successive. So there's one training I'm giving you free of charge. But technology, Joe's spoken rightly a lot about this. There's a huge amount that we should be doing, and we've done better, to be fair, to HQ than we in recent years than we've done in the past. But we could do an awful lot more with the technology that's available to us to make sure people can get the best practice, can get the resources, Sometimes I personally find it's a bit hard to find out what is available. We need to make it really easy to find out what's available. Final thing is the money. I think one of the top tasks of the next leader is to raise a lot of money. Because I don't know if you know, but we're skint. It's great that the new members have come in, and that's helped a little bit, but not enough. And I think it's been difficult for Vince to raise the money when you're at 7 or 8% in the opinion polls, because people think, we're not going to back you guys. But we're not any longer. Hey, and we could be going to those business communities who want Britain to stay in Europe and saying, cough up now, we're the people to back. We should be going to the green businesses, of which there are hundreds and thousands, and saying, if you want a party that's really going to be able to tackle the climate emergency, come and back us. I think we've got a massively huge opportunity to get far more money into our party than we've ever done before, and then to spread it out to get those smaller local parties getting more resources to do the things that, if they have that, we know they can do. I think it's a really exciting time, and I want to be in a situation where we don't have small local parties anymore.
The last question is a combination question, basically. How can we, as Liberal Democrats, make our party appeal more to voters in the areas that have been hardest hit by deindustrialisation, such as much of the East Midlands, where we are today? And also, how are we going to do that either if Brexit happens, God forbid, or if it doesn't?
I think it's an essential question, because nothing has distressed me more in the last 3 years than seeing the divisions in our society grow deeper. The divisions are always there, particularly inequality, but the divisions over the political issue of Brexit have really torn our country apart. We've seen families divided, we've seen work colleagues divided, we've seen the geography of Britain divided. And yes, I want a people's vote, and yes, we're going to win it, and yes, we're going to stop Brexit. But we need to think what happens then. Because in stopping Brexit and winning that people's vote, we've got to bring our country together again. We've got to heal those divisions. It's almost as important as winning the vote. And the question is, how do we do that? Well, first of all, we've got to tackle the regional inequalities that there are. If you look at the richest and poorest regions in Northern Europe, Britain has 2 of the richest, London and the South East. But we also have 6 of the 10 poorest. That is a stain on our society and economy. And we can use money from staying in the European Union in 2 ways. First of all, Philip Hammond, the Chancellor, has put 25 billion aside in case there's a no-deal Brexit. Now, if we don't no-deal, we can have that 25 billion, thank you very much, and that can be a down payment to leave communities so we can show them straight away, we mean business, we're going to make a fairer country. But then there's the other issue, and that's what I call the Remain dividend. Most economists, I'm an economist by training, most economists are saying that if we stay in the EU, the net benefit to the Exchequer will be £15 billion per annum. Why don't we say that that money is going to be part of bringing our country together again, of taking jobs? Now, we know what that money needs to be spent on. It needs to be spent on transport, it needs to be spent on skills, and all those sorts of key public investments. But it also needs to be spent by local communities with their local elected politicians. We need to get that money back to local authorities where it's been taken from. And I think if we're going to reach out to those leave communities who feel left behind, yes, we've got to get the economies going. We've also got to make villages, towns and cities that have become slightly shabby and have lacked that love and lacked that investment. We've got to turn that round. And I call it placemaking. You've probably heard that term. Investment in the community. And it will be decided at grassroots level by local authorities, by local people. But it is things like community centres. It is things like playgrounds. It is things like leisure centres. We've got to make sure that every community feels that they are cared for by what is in their community. And then I think we can bring our country together.
Globalisation, we know, has been a positive force for trade and has made many economies richer. But it hasn't been uniform in how the benefits of that have been distributed. And to date, here in the UK, but also in other parts of the world, politics has been poor at properly compensating those parts of the society that have been hit by those different decisions, by the outsourcing of those jobs, by the deindustrialisation. And we need to learn those lessons and, yes, invest in those communities. But I'm worried about what's happened in the past, and even more worried about what's going to happen in the future. Because we're in the middle of a technological revolution. By some estimates, 1 in 3 jobs that currently exists won't in 20 years' time. There are tens of thousands of people who are employed as drivers. We know where the technology is going on driverless cars and lorries and transport mechanisms. So that is a whole swathe of people who currently there is an occupation there, and in the future that will exist in far, far fewer numbers. Now, I actually think the technological revolution is an opportunity as well as giving us challenges, because there will be different jobs that need to be filled. But in order to make the most of that opportunity, government needs to be looking ahead and planning, and at the moment it's doing nothing but trying to make a rubbish of Brexit. And there is now political energy going into how we address that big challenge. How do we do the reskilling? How do I make sure that in a world where you don't just do 1 job for your life, or not even 2, but at different points in your career, you have to reskill in different ways, that there are points within our adult lives where we can retrain and where there is funds available for us to do that, rather than this outdated idea that you get your education and then when you're 21, that's it, off into the world and you never need to learn anything ever again. So we need to be thinking now about how we adapt to the challenges of that future, and reskilling is going to be a crucial part of how we do that. I also think we need to change the relationship between business and society. Business does not exist in a vacuum. It's not as if it's an amoral part, or should be an amoral part of what we do. Business is part of our society, part of our communities, and has responsibilities to our society and our communities. But the 1980s kind of mindset of it's all about profit, everything else is secondary, cannot possibly be considered, and that the responsibility of people running a business is only to think about how much money they return to their shareholders. That has been a toxic model for our economy. It has created huge inequality. It has been wrecking our planet, and it has to stop. People working in businesses go to work thinking, how can I just be horrible today? No. People want to go to work and do good things and be proud of the organisation they work in. But we need to make sure that the structures help them to do that. We need to make sure that we incentivise people holding shares for the long term so that they get incentives to do that. Extra voting rights, extra benefits through the taxation system, so that they can become stewards rather than this short-term trading, which is all about what happens in 3 weeks' time. We need to make businesses declare what their social purpose is, so that it's something that they get asked about by their shareholders, by their consumers, by their employees. And we need to turn the economy into something that we're all slaves to, into something that works for us, where we decide as a society what's important, and then we work out how to make our economy pursue those goals. Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand has just declared that the purpose for their economy is going to be maximising well-being. And how different our society would be if we did that too. 10 years ago, I set up the all-party group on wellbeing economics. This is the direction that we need to go in to transform the way our society and economy works.
Candidates, as long as we keep our next set of answers quite short and concise, we have time for one.
Oh, marvellous.
Right, the question is from Pushkin Chowdhury. So, are you all right if I read? Oh, no, we have the microphone lead. There you go. Brilliant.
Hi, I'm Pushkin Chowdhury. And I'm also a member of the GLD, please join. So I was just wondering what the candidates thought of a 4-day working week. That's the question.
Excellent speech at conference, by the way. I'm not sure I would even go for a 4-day working week, because I think the phrase 4-day working week is a bit outdated about how work happens now. As if it is something which A, only happens on particular days, and B, it's a certain set hours in every day. We have massive problems in our country with presenteeism, with productivity, and it's this culture that it's about you physically being there in the office, with the jacket on the back of your chair, how early you get in, how late you stay, rather than what you get done. And it's outcomes that matter. And I think, we're working on a basis where we still have this sort of 9-to-5 model that was brought in literally for car manufacturing about 100 years ago, because it actually did make sense to have everybody there together when you're on the assembly line. In a world where we have loads of technology, it does not make sense that we are still organising our workplaces on that basis. So when I was a minister, I increased flexible working. I think that is the future, and some organisations massively embrace that and enable their employees to have lives outside of work, recognise they will get better staff loyalty, and that they will have more productive employees if that is what they do. That is how we need to reimagine the workplace of the future. We will all working more flexibly and in a proportion that enables us to do the life outside of work, which is what we would all have better well-being if we do.
Well, first of all, I like the sound of the idea of a 4-day working week. That would suit me great. But seriously, Jo's right about flexible working. I did Jo's job before her when I moved into the cabinet, and I did 2 years as employment minister. Did a lot of work on a lot of employment legal issues, including flexible working. And when you talk to businesses who'd really embraced flexible working, they found it was really positive for their staff and for their productivity, because it worked around people's lives. So I think we do need to move away from the old ways of thinking about this, and we do need to embrace a much more progressive approach. And as employment minister, one of the things I'm proudest of, I got rid of what's called the default retirement age. That was a point at which it was legal to sack someone just because they'd reached the retirement age. And it was highly discriminatory against older people, often who had huge skills to provide. And although it had been in the coalition agreement, the Tories didn't want me to do it. And the CBI didn't want me to do it. But when I looked into it, it was actually really good for the workplace. You could keep on to those people who wanted to stay on and didn't allow employers to just be able to sack them. But actually, you found that older workers work really well with younger workers and help mentoring them, train them. So that was an example of getting away from an old-fashioned law, which allowed employers to behave in outrageous ways, frankly, and brought in a new approach. And I think as Liberals, that's exactly what we should do. We should allow people to have that freedom. We should allow and encourage that greater flexibility. And I think we should go much further with employment legislation. I'm involved in one or two charities. I'm on a board of, I'm a patron for something called the Disability Law Service. And what we're looking at is not just requiring employers to make reasonable adaptations for their employees who've got disabilities, but we're also looking at the idea of forcing employers where there's a carer who's looking after a sick person or disabled person, that the employer makes reasonable adaptations for the carer. And I give that as an example because if we can make our labour laws more flexible and improve that dialogue between employer and employer, we will have a much better workplace, a much happier workforce, and by the way, a much higher quality of life for people.
Thank you very much, candidates. If I will ask you to do your summing up now, Ed. On you go.
Thanks, Alison. Friends, soon Conservative Party members will be holding meetings like this. A bit different, perhaps. But they think they're choosing the next Prime Minister. I think tonight, and in this contest, you will be choosing a future Prime Minister. The tectonic plates of British politics are moving. I think the Tory party could split if Boris becomes the Prime Minister. I think the Labour Party could split as the hard left takes control. We're seeing lifelong Tories come to us, lifelong Labour people come to us. This is a historic moment, and I believe I'm the leader for this moment. I've sat at the Cabinet table and at the National Security Council. I've negotiated hard in Cabinet, in government and at the EU. And I believe I've made the right political judgments over time. Take Change UK. I was one of the people who said we shouldn't do deals and pacts and mergers. And when Chuka Amuna joined us this week, that judgment was shown to be right. And my CV for leader has a lot more. I have vast experience of going on the media over 20 years. And when I go on the media, I'm pretty robust because we need to be. I've got the better of John Humphreys on a number of occasions. And last year on Any Questions, Jonathan Dimbleby had to stop the audience from clapping me. So I now have to win the audience round. But above all, I have the grit and determination of a street-level campaigner, and I have the vision for our party on the economy and on climate change. Friends, our Liberal task today could not be more serious. Stopping Brexit and healing our country. I am ready for that task. I'm up for that task. Come and campaign with me and let's win.
Liberal Democrats, we need a leader who can cut through on the media, who can reach out to new voters and be the rallying point for our Liberal cause. Now, I am pretty confident that everybody in this hall has at one time or another taken to Facebook or had a bit of a rant about how they don't see enough Liberal Democrats on the media. In the last couple of weeks, I've been on LBC, Talk Radio, BBC Breakfast, Sky News, Channel 4, Radio 2, Newsnight, Good Morning Britain, Question Time, Andrew Marr, and the Today programme twice. I can cut through on the media. I do this for our party to talk about Liberal Democrat values and ideas. We need a leader who can reach out to new voters across the generations, across the country, and across traditional party lines. Reaching out to younger voters means being on social media, being where young people are, I have nearly 70,000 followers on my social media platforms, and in the first 3 days after my launch, had 3 million impressions on social media. I reach out to young voters. I've lived in Scotland, in Yorkshire, and in London. I reach out across the whole of our United Kingdom. And in terms of reaching out across party lines, I have strong relationships with those in other parties, and my non-tribal way of doing politics is exactly what we need for the opportunity we have right now. We're at a rallying point for the Liberal movement. So many people have joined our party in recent weeks. 1,500 joined our party on the day I launched my campaign. I am the rallying point for our Liberal movement. We can do this. We can do this together. So join me.
Thank you very much, everybody, for attending and participating today. Being Liberal Democrats, we have the opportunity to get involved in green organisations and communities and at all levels of politics to promote the agenda that is about saving the world on which we live. There is only one planet here, and it's David Attenborough's, I'm afraid. So, thank you very much to our candidates for coming to see us and speak to us today. And I think with all of us in the room, we'd like to say thank you to you, and we look forward to you putting the environment back in focus. Thank you very much.